The criminals here are Hamas. It was a crime to take the hostages, and every day since October 7th, 2023, it's been a crime to hold them. And we know that what goes on in captivity in those tunnels is horrible. There has been torture, there has been probably sexual abuse, and unfortunately some of the hostages were just executed in cold blood. So this always needs to be said, and it always needs to be remembered. I also think that this war should have stopped sooner. It should have been over now for some time. And if it had been over, there might have been an earlier chance to get the hostage deal that we're all hoping for.
That is the voice of German ambassador to Israel, Steffen Seibert, speaking with State of Tel Aviv in his office a few days ago, on Monday, December 16th. We touched on many issues in our interview, but the matter of the 100 hostages remaining in Hamas captivity was prominent, and for two reasons. Very recently, a somewhat heightened but cautious optimism has begun to build that a deal may be struck to release the remaining hostages. As well, throughout this horrific ordeal, Ambassador Seibert has been an unflagging advocate for the hostages and their families from the very first moments of this crisis. I first met Ambassador Seibert at an event held a couple of months ago to draw attention to the continuing captivity of the hostages. The Hostage Family Forum, as it is known, is a volunteer organization that has worked tirelessly since October 7th to support hostage families and ensure that the captivity of 100 people in Hamas tunnels remains at the fore of public awareness, both within Israel and internationally. The Hostage Family Forum hosted an evening for foreign diplomats to plead, frankly, that they continue to work and to do everything possible, everything and anything, to work towards the release of the remaining captives. Think outside the box, implored the evening's host, Lior Ashkenazi, a huge acting star in Israel. There were speakers. One former hostage, Aviva Siegel, was forced to leave her husband Keith behind when she was released in November 2023. Her torment is devastating, that she is compelled still to beg for her husband's life. There are no words. There was the mother of a female IDF soldier, Daniela Gilboa, who was injured and taken to Gaza. And there was Ambassador Steffen Seibert. He cuts an elegant figure, tall and with a strong but casual presence in a room, or, in this case, on the roof of a building on a temperate fall evening in Tel Aviv. Ambassador Seibert addressed the group as he always does, with commitment, compassion. He is eloquent, authentic, and approachable. From the first moments of October 7th, Ambassador Seibert has been unceasingly supportive of hostage families and the cause of bringing them home. He often speaks at the Saturday night support rallies in Tel Aviv for the hostages, and he always does so in Hebrew. I've seen many diplomats come and go. Very few have made the effort to learn Hebrew, and doing so is a profound gesture. Seibert is not a career diplomat. He was appointed to represent Germany in Israel after having served as the government spokesman for 12 years during the tenure of Chancellor Angela Merkel. When offered the opportunity to serve as Germany's ambassador to Israel, he said he needed no more than 10 seconds to accept. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel, and now hoping so hard that the hostages are released so that we can begin to heal in this country and perhaps, maybe, as Ambassador Seibert says, find a way to live in peace with our neighbors and them with us. Ambassador Steffen Seibert, thank you so much for making the time to meet with State of Tel Aviv today.
Thank you for having me.
I have been watching you from afar for some time now, and the incredible work that you've been doing since you began serving as the German ambassador to Israel. And that was, I believe, in August 2022, correct?
July, but nearly correct.
All right.
Yes.
I was close. Okay. So let's go back, though, if we can, just prior to you arriving in Israel. And I understand we're not focusing, of course, on your previous life, but I think it's important for our listeners to have some idea of who it is that State of Tel Aviv is speaking with today. You were a successful journalist for many years, television journalist, and then you spent 12 years working very closely with Chancellor Angela Merkel.
11 and a half, yes, absolutely. From 2010 till she left office in December of 21.
And you were working as a communications advisor, policy. What was your role?
I was the government spokesman, which says what it was. I was the spokesman for the entire government, but also her, as it were, personal spokesman. And in that capacity, we worked very closely for a very long time, and I would say very happily.
Well, obviously happily, because 12 years in that sort of role is highly unusual. They're very demanding roles, and you did it for a long period of time, and she's an extraordinary, in my view, an extraordinary person and politician. So there must have been a very fluid and comfortable and strong relationship. 12 years at the side of someone like Angela Merkel. What were your major takeaways in terms of professional experience and how you looked at the world?
Well, I suppose I was very fortunate in the way she worked with me as her government spokesman, which means that she worked very closely and she let me pretty much sit in on every international meeting that she had and traveled with her on every single trip that she took, was with her when all of her international visitors came to speak to her. So I was exposed, and this is probably the main takeaway for me when I think of my present job. I was exposed to 11 and a half years of foreign policy at a very high level. I was always the guy sitting in the back, not saying anything, but still I was exposed to it. And I saw how she prepared for this. We did this together. Sometimes we worked on speeches and statements. And so when I came to this job, being an ambassador, and you know that I'm not a career diplomat, but I came in sideways, which is very rare in the German system, at least I had quite a bit of foreign policy experience, as it were, under my belt. And this is all thanks to those years.
She's an extraordinary person to be tutored by as well. So as tempting as it is to ask you about some of the rooms you were in, I'm not going to. I was also, as you may be aware, what we call a political appointee, so bypassed the usual appointment system. So I think we're both aware of benefits and disadvantages that we bring when appointed to a position like this. I'm going to assume that you had options, and that of the options you chose the opportunity to serve Germany as the ambassador to Israel. That's a big job for so many reasons. And the relationship, of course, as we know, is often referred to as being a special one. And wow, that's
we
an
have
alarm,
that
folks.
still? Wow, that's unusual. Okay, let's go.
The sudden interruption is the sounding of the alarm in the embassy and throughout central Israel, just as we were getting into the historical relationship between Germany and Israel. So, yes, we shut down and made a beeline for the safe room. Have a look at the map in the podcast notes to get a sense of the scope of the attack. Turns out it was the Houthis, perhaps the last Iranian proxy in the region, with the capability to flex their muscle by pounding central Israel with missiles. All were intercepted or landed in empty areas. Following our break in the shelter, about 10 minutes long, Ambassador Seibert and I then carried on. Well, this is as good a time as any to once again thank State of Tel Aviv listeners who support our work with a paid subscription, without which we would not be able to bring you conversations such as this one with greater and lesser known figures, people working and living in this quite remarkable moment in history to effect change and effect policy for the betterment of all. Please consider becoming a paid subscriber if you are not already. Today, no gimmicks, no holiday specials, just quality content, week in, week out. Now, back to Ambassador Seibert. Okay, so here we are, back after an interlude in the Mamad, the safe room. It seems that the Houthis were a little trigger happy. Pleased to report that everything seems to have been intercepted, and we carry on as we do. So, Ambassador, when you were considering taking this role, what was it that appealed to you?
Yeah, I mean, considering sounds as if I'd wrecked my brain for a week or so. I considered this for about 10 seconds after I was offered it, because how could I not say yes? It's in the German diplomatic system and in German foreign policy. I think representing my country in Israel is as exciting, as important, as much of an honor as it gets. The relationship between Germany and Israel is a unique one from our side, but I'm sure also for the Israelis, there's no relationship like the one with Germany for the obvious historical reasons. And to represent my country here, I didn't have to consider this very much. I was overjoyed that I was given the honor and the opportunity to do this.
And before you came, I'm assuming that you had visited the country on numerous occasions.
I had visited it not very often, but a couple of times, once privately and several times sort of professionally with Chancellor Merkel. So I can't say I knew the country or had any experience of living here or something. No, this was much of my knowledge about Israel was, what I read, what I heard in discussions, what I knew from books and documentaries and from many political discussions I'd sat in on. But it's a very different thing to be here day in, day out, to have friends here, to explore also, the other, not just the Jewish part of the country, but also the Arab Palestinian population, to make friends among the Druze. This is something that you cannot do from a desk in Germany.
No, you cannot. I've been on the ground here for 11 years now. 2.5 of those I was serving as Canada's ambassador to Israel, but significant time since as a regular civilian. And I've seen the diplomats come and go and watched your arrival and your presence since you arrived. And it's been extraordinary. Now, you are a media spokesperson, so you obviously have tools that you bring to the trade, but authenticity is something you can't fabricate or make up. And that was one of the first qualities that you exuded from the moment you arrived. Among other things, you've made an extraordinary effort to learn to speak Hebrew.
Well, an extraordinary effort. Millions have tried before me. I just thought that, and this would have been true for every country that I might have found myself in. You're in a country for more than, a short period of time, you should try to learn the language. And with Hebrew, I find it particularly important because this language carries so much of the historical inheritance of the Jewish people. So that when you use very everyday Hebrew words now, it sometimes takes you back 3,000 years. Some of them open a whole panorama of historical and religious meaning. So it's a fantastically fascinating language, very difficult to learn for me. But no, I'm glad I made that effort. I have a wonderful teacher who I meet once a week, and we do an hour and a half. And okay, liat, there is progress.
Look, I'm of the view that every language opens a culture and a national, like a psychology. We were speaking earlier before I turned on the microphones about, I made the comment that, you were fortunate to have a year to serve before October 7th hit. And you made the point quite rightly that it was still quite something for a European from a country that has enjoyed peace for a very long time to arrive in Israel and find oneself in a shelter, not infrequently. Tell us about your early days.
The first 10 or 11 weeks, my wife and I were in an apartment in Schenken Street in the middle of Tel Aviv. Everybody knows that street. And waiting for some renovation in the residence to be carried out. So we were right in the center of things with Rothschild Boulevard or around the corner. So it was the perfect start to life here in Tel Aviv. At the same time, right from the start, you could sense that this was not a country at peace. It wasn't, not even in the summer of 22. There was this kind of mini war with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, which Hamas stayed out of, making everyone believe that maybe they were not so terroristic anymore. It turns out that this was big-time deceit, which we all fell for, the international community just as much as the Israeli government. So right from the start, what we kind of loosely call security challenges, when we talk about this in diplomatic circles, became very tangible, because a security challenge means that there can be terror or that you can have to run to the mamad. But it also means that, there is an occupation going on with very bloody interludes after operations that the IDF carries out. And this all in a very small country where nothing grave that happens is more than, an hour's drive away. It takes some getting used to. And you find, what I would like to say is that you see that people that was my impression, that people carry this around with them, that they carry this experience in their hearts. The fact that their children have to go to the IDF and put themselves into danger. The fact that, things happen so very nearby. This leaves no one, and it should leave no one, kind of cool and unaffected.
It's impossible.
And it's a different life from the life in Europe.
And I want to get into, the kind of origin conflict, if I can put it that way, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the German policy and position on that issue. But first, I would like to just briefly segue into October 7th and the aftermath, because that shook the ground for everyone. October 7th, you were here physically, and pardon my French, but all hell broke loose. And from the first moment, you were present. And when I say present, I mean very engaged, very public, very supportive of a country that was in agony. And you've distinguished yourself, in my view, with respect to the way in which you have spoken up for the hostage families, the hostages, and brought profile, not just within Israel, but internationally, to that issue. Your job and your life changed in that moment at 6:29 a.m. on Saturday, October 7th, 2023. How did you feel it?
Well, like most people at first, I didn't grasp the enormity of what was happening. It revealed itself piecemeal, as it were. But yeah, by 8:30 or 9 o'clock, we all knew that something unprecedented had happened, and that the scale of the massacre, of the atrocities, was unlike anything that anyone could remember, not in this country. And yeah, you'd have to go back a lot of decades to find something like that. And then, I'd said, this is a very small country. Very quickly, you find out that your friend's son was one who, rushed to the scene in Otef Aza. You find out that, through 2 or 3 people that you are almost, you're connected to people who were abducted. And then on the 8th in the morning, I will never forget, someone called me, I don't know how he got my number, and sobbingly told me that his father had been abducted and he was a German. And that's when that whole angle revealed itself to me, that there were at some point, there were over 20 German hostages, German citizens hostage in Gaza. There's still a double-digit number now, which is horrible. And yeah, and that's how I thought it was my job to be there for these people, for these families, as much as I could, doing at least what I could do. And at first, what I could do was just, lend them an ear and let them tell their stories and carry their stories back to Germany, make sure that every German visitor who came here, we had 9 visits from our foreign minister since the 7th of October, that she would always meet the hostage families and hear what they had to say, hear their demands, hear their worries. This was sometimes also we could help them a little bit through the bureaucratic jungle of Germany, which is considerable if you know Germany. I think we were able to help there. Yeah, this became a big part of my embassy's work, and that's also my work. And then as time goes by, you become very attached to these people who are wonderful people. All of them are wonderful people who haven't given up one single day fighting for their loved ones, who go to enormous lengths to keep telling the story and not letting it be forgotten, who sometimes also get a very hard time from parts of the political establishment in this country. And that doesn't deter them. I think when your son or your daughter or your father was taken hostage to Gaza, you don't give a damn what some minister tells you. And this is what I feel from these people, this extraordinary, complete and total dedication to the one job they think they have, and that's to bring them back. And as much as I can, and as much as we can here at the embassy, we're with them.
You've spoken many times at the Saturday night support rallies in Tel Aviv, and perhaps in other towns as well. It's powerful. It's very powerful to see a foreign diplomat on stage and supporting the people who are fighting so hard, as you say, to have their loved ones returned, but not just to the family members, the whole country. This really goes to the soul of the country, this issue. But you mentioned, I wasn't aware that there are still how many German nationals who are hostages?
A low double-digit number. And we cannot say whether they're alive, all of them, some of them. We just assume that many of them will still be alive. We hope all of them, but there's no way of knowing. But yeah, this is the biggest number of foreign nationals in Gaza kept in captivity.
And I'm sure that in every way possible, you have worked to secure their release or to try to get some sort of information. Have you had contact with the International Red Cross Committee?
Yeah. I mean, not only me personally, I have, but also, of course, our task force in Berlin and all our leading politicians. Yes, I feel a great sense of. I mean, it's nice that you know what you say about our commitment, but I feel a great sense of frustration. I'll be honest with you, because since November last year, when fortunately a great number was released, for over a year now, we haven't seen the release of a single hostage. I cannot tell you how frustrating this is to me, because for all the nice speeches, and they come from the heart, what you really want to do is help these people get their loved ones back. Now, we can't do it alone. No one can do it alone. We speak to every power in the world that might have influence and access to Hamas, to the Turks, to the Qataris, to the Egyptians, to everybody. We also, of course, speak to the Israeli side and the Americans, who are doing a wonderful job in the negotiations. But, we're not there yet. And until that moment, I cannot be in any way satisfied.
What do you think is the major block?
Well, there's no doubt. The criminals here are Hamas. It was a crime to take the hostages, and every day since October 7th, 2023, it's been a crime to hold them. And we know that what goes on in captivity in those tunnels is horrible. There has been torture, there has been probably sexual abuse, and unfortunately some of the hostages were just executed in cold blood. So this always needs to be said, and it always needs to be remembered. I also think that this war should have stopped sooner. It should have been over now for some time. And if it had been over, there might have been an earlier chance to get the hostage deal that we're all hoping for. Since I'm not sitting in on the negotiations, I cannot and will not blame anyone. I just think that the continuation of the war certainly also hasn't helped. And I think I know that some people for many months have said that it will be the military effort that will get the hostages released. Now, this is unfortunately something that I never could fully believe in. And I know there was one case in particular where 4 hostages were militarily rescued, and this was an amazing feat. I just don't think this is going to work for the high number of hostages that we still have. And on the contrary, I think there's a real risk by, the vicinity of military operations. And this is what we've unfortunately seen in the execution and the very cruel execution of these 6 hostages. So I hope for a cessation of hostilities, which will go parallel with the release of the hostages. And then if you put aside the hostage issue, you look at the situation on the ground, as it were, in Gaza, you see the total physical destruction of the entire Gaza Strip. You see 2 million plus people in the most horrendous of circumstances. That also tells me that this has got to stop, and we have to make the transition to some sort of peaceful reconstruction. And this is going to be a very long process, but it must start.
It must start. And the other thing that we all must pay attention to, in addition to returning Israelis who were forced to leave their homes both in the north and the south of the country, we're all faced with the dilemma that never dies, that never goes away. And that is some sort of resolution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. And I know this is something that Germany has a very strong position on, and that it was important for, I think, both of us to talk about today in this interview. Germany supports a policy of 2 states for 2 people. Is that correct?
Well, we support, first of all, and this is particularly important for me to say as the ambassador to Israel, we support the right to existence of Israel and the right to a safe and secure existence. This is the number one priority we have. And every other thing needs to guarantee, every other demand needs to guarantee that right of safe and secure existence. We also, that's right, completely support the right of the Palestinians to their own state, to living a sovereign and dignified life in their own state, which for many decades now they haven't had. And we can support this because we strongly believe that this will lead to more and not less security for the state of Israel. If it's done right, if it's accompanied by security guarantees, but it can and must be done because we believe that the current status quo, where Israel continues to be the occupying power in its, 58th or something year, that this is not sustainable and will not lead to long-term security for the state of Israel. Yes, this is basically our conviction. Now, I'm not naive, and I know that this is not going to go from one day to the next, from 1 month to the next, but it has every generation now, because you're going to tell me in a moment that every effort to do this in the past decades has failed. This is what everybody says, and there's no way of denying that. But every generation of leaders on both sides has the responsibility to not live with a status quo that is bad, but to try to overcome it and lead the region to something better. And I think it can be done. I think there are people on both sides with whom it can be done. I think the will needs to be there, and then small and then bigger steps can be taken. The regional situation is such that you will have a lot of regional support for this. You will have the support of the United States and the European Union. That's not a little thing. So it can be done, yes. And I think after October 7th, I know that psychologically it seems difficult to think along those lines. But you can also look at October 7th in a different way, and you can say, now more than ever, we must solve this. We must, of course, defeat Hamas. There must never be any threat from Hamas coming out of the Gaza Strip again. This is undeniably true. But this is now also the moment to defeat terrorism by creating a peaceful future. Peace with the Palestinians would not be a reward for terrorism, as some people say. I believe it would be the final triumph over terrorism. because this is not what Mr. Sinwar ever wanted. This is not what Mr. Nasrallah ever wanted. They didn't want the peaceful coexistence of two states. They wanted everything for their idea of an Islamist rule, and there would be no Jewish state. I think if you want to keep the Jewish state in the borders of 67, secure and prosperous, then that is the way to go. And the international support for it would be huge. I know there are obstacles to overcome, but if you look at it on the other way and you say, okay, if we go back to the situation as it was on the 6th, that was not a good situation either.
I'd like to close with asking you represent a very powerful country and a highly regarded country and an important country, needless to say. And you are here on the ground. And you're right, we can't go back to October 6th, nor can we focus on the failures of the last 76 years to fashion or finesse a peace. But if you had the opportunity to suggest what might be an approach to begin, where would you start and what would you do?
First of all, I think that Gaza should be a starting point. A cessation of hostilities, the hostages come free, and the dead hostages come home at least so that their parents can have closure. And then there needs to be a Gaza administered and ruled by Palestinians. We've said for many months that the obvious choice for a partner for that to happen and to be, for this new Palestinian leadership, the obvious choice would be the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. For all its shortcomings and all its need to reform, they are the ones who could have gone in already, or elements in conjunction with them, in connection with them, with their blessing, whatever, could have gone in and created a new Palestinian administration in Gaza. This would have been, I think, the beginning, and that would have had the support from the Saudis and from the Emiratis. This is what everybody said publicly. This could have been a starting point, because it would, for the first time in many years, make sure that the same kind of people were in charge both in the West Bank and in Gaza. And then you can take it from there. I think this would be my wish. But before that, I would just really want for people from both sides, and this goes to the Israelis as much as to the Palestinians, to start looking at the other side as human beings. As I would wish for Israelis to be able to look at Gaza and say, these tens of thousands of people, they bleed as we bleed. When a mother loses a child there, it is the same kind of hole in her heart that it is for a mother to lose her child here. And I would want the same from the Palestinians, where there's also a lack of empathy to the suffering of the Jewish people in Israel. This is something that really is the necessary human foundation on which to even start building a peace. That's my strong conviction. And because there is not enough human contact, because there are not enough groups that work for this understanding between, Israelis and Palestinians, because it's very difficult for them right now to even get together, and because it's not exactly, let's say, officially encouraged right now, there is such a distance between these two people, such a failure to see the human on the other side.
How do you fit into that paradigm, wishful, hopeful paradigm, stance of the Palestinian Authority, pay to slay, the glorification of...
Well, there can be no doubt that is a very negative thing. It's something that, I'm not the ambassador for the West Bank. We have people in Ramallah, so they would know a lot more about that. I know that this is something that we and other Western countries have spoken to them for a long time. This needs to be rectified or reformed. You cannot have anything that looks like a direct reward for terroristic activities. And I hear that at least some people in the new government in Ramallah are open to that kind of argument. But of course, what counts is, will there be a change or not? But it's not. It's a horrible thing, goes without saying.
I wanted to ask you about vis-a-vis kind of changing the dynamics, opening, creating opportunities for some sort of meaningful exchange in order to find a way forward between Palestinians and Israelis. UNRWA, where is Germany at these days with respect to supporting UNRWA?
Well, we still, or again, contribute to the funding of UNRWA. Why do we do this? Because we think that they have right now and currently still an important role to play in Gaza, in delivering the most basic supplies, the most basic aid to the people of Gaza. And from what we hear on the ground, everybody whom we ask says they cannot be replaced at the moment. So this is why we do not want the people of Gaza to pay, and we continue to support UNRWA. We were very critical of, we were very, how do I say, we were very alarmed by the accusations that were leveled against UNRWA, and that certainly in a whole number of cases were fully justified, and that's why we ask UNRWA to take this very seriously, to also be serious about the necessary reforms that they have to undertake on very basic procedures inside the organization. And this is where we stand on UNRWA. We're not happy with and critical of the decisions that the Knesset has taken, especially in their immediate effect on what goes on in Gaza. We think this is something that the already very suffering people of Gaza will have to pay a price for, and that shouldn't be the case. But I also take very seriously the need of UNRWA to reform and to follow the recommendations that were made for its reform.
Well, let's hope that in the weeks and months to come, in the very near future, that we see at a minimum the release of the hostages. And then I think that the rebuilding, such as it will be, will have a chance. But sadly, until that happens, I think that we're kind of frozen in time, unfortunately. Ambassador, is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap for the day?
Oh, God, this country is so intense that easily we could have another 6-7 issues to talk about. Talk about the future of the West Bank, talk about things in this country. But no, I think it's a wrap for today, and then we'll see.
I'd like to thank you so much again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's hope for peace.
Today, Wednesday, December 18th, we wait. We wait for news that a deal has been struck. More on that in my National Post column that will be out in the next day or two, and, as always, I will post it on the State of Tel Aviv site. We are so grateful that we were able to speak with Ambassador Seibert and look forward to continuing the discussion, perhaps after the hostages have been released. In the meantime, thanks for being here, and until next time, stay safe. Oh, and look out. Very soon, like in the next day or so, we are launching our YouTube channel with a really interesting and long chat with Professor Gad Saad, author of The Parasitic Mind, brilliant social critic, behavioral scientist at Concordia University in Montreal, and leading public intellectual, speaking out fearlessly for the future of liberal democracy. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. You can follow us at State of TLV on X or at State of Tel Aviv on Instagram. Please, you know what I'm going to ask. Like us, love us, comment. It's all so helpful with that algorithm stuff that I'll pretend I understand. Thanks for being here. Have a good one. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Szabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.